Did you see the Batman?
Yeah, I did manage to catch that. We
good?
saw it at 8:30. It was when it started, and the place was packed. Every seat. You would have thought that there was zero pandemics in the world, but every seat was filled. Yeah, we got out of there, and it was like 3 hours later. Because we sat through the entire credits for that half a second after credits sequence. Did I like it? It was an enjoyable movie. It had plenty of flaws.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to do the spoiler stuff. It had some good stuff, it had some great stuff, it had some stuff, and then it had like a oh boy. But the oh boy is what I can't talk about, especially I can't talk about.
Well, I probably won't see it in the theater. I'm just not that excited about it. So when I see it on the home video, I'll let you know.
I will continue to attest to the fact that while seeing a thing in the theater there's a communal experience. It's always great. But seeing it at home is like, I much prefer that, because there was a couple people and they were in the front couple of rows that couldn't find their way out of the theater or in the theater without their phone on, with a flashlight on their phone going. So it just illuminated the entire theater. And to make matters worse, they must have borrowed a bladder from a cat, because they got up frequently in order to use the restroom. I think these are our seats, and they would sit down and they just flash a flashlight all over the theater. It's like, are you trying to draw attention? Is this intentional?
Well, when we went to see Spider-Man, the latest Spider-Man movie, I wondered why the person in our row, it wasn't packed for one, but somebody sat, like 4 seats down from us. And every dialogue, they laughed. And it wasn't like a it was a cackle. Every time they tried to be funny in the movie, that was a really big cackle. Like, it was just, my sons would look at me like, please, shoot me now. And... it was just, people are different. People find things funny. I normally doesn't bother me. It was the frequency of it.
And that was something that happened in the Batman movie. And to make matters worse, there was nothing intentionally funny. Oh, yeah, that was good. And you're like going, it wasn't laugh worthy. You may have said like,
some people say the same thing about our podcast.
Yeah, we're not that far from it, are we? We're basically everybody's flashlight on their phone. Just
I've heard it's described as having the bladder of a cat.
You're listening to And This Is Why I Love Comics.
And welcome to another episode of And This Is Why I Love Comics. I am co-host Andy, that's me.
And I'm the lesser co-host, Michael.
Stop, you're not a lesser co-host. You called yourself a sidekick earlier. You're not my sidekick. You're stuck with this podcast.
Forever and ever?
That's right, you're tied to it.
Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with the what is it, the 4th most popular folk band in New Zealand, the Flight of the Conchords, but one of theirs was like, "A Kiss Is Not a Contract" was in one of the names of their songs. And it's like, yeah, a podcast is not a contract.
That's right. And we're back again. If this is your first episode, welcome. This is basically what we do. We just chat away and we talk about comics. We talk about life. We talk about each other. We do some quizzes. We are ancient to teenagers. I have a couple and they think I'm really old, but they love me anyway.
Yes.
We've known each other a long time. We talk about comics.
Our mutual friendship probably stunted our growth. We met in 9th grade, and I don't think we've matured a day since then.
If anything, I think we've gone backwards.
Let's talk about some fart jokes.
That's right. Let's do that. Oh, well, that's life.
Yeah, that's why we're still talking about comic books to this day.
We collect them, we read them, we talk about them, we've made them, all that stuff. So it's fun to chat about. Tell a friend if you like what you hear. Thanks for downloading us. and giving us your chance. I know there's a lot of other podcasts out there that you could listen to. Chosen to listen to ours, so thank you very much. Taking a swig of water.
That's podcasting.
Was that like a, this is pod racing?
Yeah. Man, that is some solid dialogue.
That's right. I am looking forward to the Obi-Wan Kenobi miniseries from Disney Plus.
Yeah, I'm back and forth on it, and the only reason why I'm saying back and forth on it is you take the good and you take the bad. With the Obi-Wan, Ewan McGregor, fantastic.
He was the best thing about the prequels.
Yeah.
And I like the prequels more than you. Let's just state that right away.
It got followed up, and I will say it also got fouled up by a certain actor whose ability was probably less than stellar. And I can't imagine that it's gotten any better.
J.J. Abrams?
Jar Jar Abrams? No. The Hayden Christensen is supposed to be, he's slated to come back.
Oh, I like Hayden Christensen.
Oh, man.
He grew on me.
Let's talk about dirt for a moment. Sand, it gets into everything.
That wasn't his acting. That was the script.
Yeah. I don't know. But did you see Jumper?
I did see Jumper.
And I'm still thinking that at any moment that line could have appeared there, because it was just like I'm hoping that time equals maturity equals better judgment.
Can you just admit that you love Hayden Christensen? Because it's going to take a while for me to edit those words coming from your mouth.
Yeah, I most certainly do love Hayden Christensen.
Thanks. That makes it a lot easier. Thank you.
That just cut about 3 hours of your life. Give that back. That's my Christmas gift to you, to say that right now. And just
my kids thank you.
Yeah. There's a lot of things wrong with that. I mean, like right down to the midichlorians, which kind of like demystified the Jedi. Yeah. And I think I mentioned already when I had that opportunity to go to Skywalker Ranch and talk with the head of licensing there.
And you said no, because you once hired Hayden Christensen. So I am not going in there.
I threw my gauntlet down and I said, "No, sir, I will not." I said, "Good day."
I said, "Good day, George Lucas. Good day." Okay, so Star Wars: The Phantom Menace came out in 1999.
Yes.
I was 28 years old, give or take. There had been no Star Wars movies for a long time. And
don't forget the Ewok. Those Ewok caravan of whatever or something like that.
Right. It'd been at least 15 years since Star Wars, the original trilogy, came out. Yep. So I was excited to see The Phantom Menace. Our friend Aaron, who we lost a couple weeks ago, and I went to see The Phantom Menace at the midnight showing. We watched the movie, and at 3 a.m., we watched the movie again. That's how excited we were for The Phantom Menace. Now,
see Star Wars again.
Yeah, it was just the feeling. You're back in the theater. It hadn't been around for 15 years. I even, I laughed at the Jar Jar stuff. I don't know why. Maybe because it was like 2 a.m. But The Phantom Menace had some of the best lightsaber scenes in any of the movies. I appreciate The Phantom Menace a bit more because of the absence of the movies. And I mean, now it's every couple of years there's a movie out.
Yeah.
And we have TV shows now. People don't realize the gap between real Star Wars and another real Star Wars movie, because there was just books and there wasn't a lot of them, but eventually there is. But even the books took time to come out.
Yeah, the Timothy Zahn, I think, is what kind of triggered. It was the catalyst for all that. With the Heir to the Empire, those books that came out, and everybody's like going, "What? Star Wars? This is a viable property?" That was one of the biggest licensing events I got. It was way back when I worked at a company that was invited to see a pre-screening of the movie because we were doing product based off of the movie. So we had to see how these characters would look and interact and who was who's a major player and so forth, so that we knew that, Newt Gunray was not going to be the hero that saves the universe. So I got to see it, but was sequestered so as not to be able to divulge or release any imagery or say anything about it. I was like, I've got a secret.
Did you sign a non-disclosure?
Yeah, there's all sorts of things. We had a separate room that we could work on this stuff that was sealed every evening. It was pretty intense, and only we could get into that room. The rest, no one else could go into the room. But the bigger story, I think the movie came out, let's say May 10th, 1999. I can't remember, but it was early in May. And that was, my son was born shortly after the release of that movie. I was super excited about the birth of my son and super excited about the, Star Wars coming out, obviously, with all the license and all the work I'd put into, to make matters interesting. My parents came down to visit us. We were in Indianapolis at the time. My parents come down to visit us. They said, hey, your child's born. Why don't you guys just, we'll watch the child. You've given us enough food for him. We've changed diapers before. We'll take care. You guys just need to just step away for a couple hours and just as yourself, and then you guys can come back and refresh. What do? I said, wifey of mine, come on over. We're going to go down to this movie theater and we're going to watch this new Star Wars movie. You're going to be amazed. It's Star Wars. And so she was like, okay, yeah, that's something we can do. I don't think she was thrilled, but she went along with it. And we got to the theater. We get in there. THX certified. They decided that if the speakers could go to 11, they were going to go to 11. I mean, the volume was cranked. The theater was massive. The screen was super bright. We went to it during kind of the middle of the day, so there wasn't super packed, but there was still some people there that must have left work to go see it at a similar time we did. It's air conditioned. It starts moving. You hear that THX burn. The audience is listening.
Your butt cheeks are vibrating.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like your fillings are popping right out of their teeth. It's just insanity. And then it's like pew, 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 zap, 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 blaster, blaster, blaster. All that is just going off right away. The whole Jedi's is Obi-Wan passes gas and it's trapped in that room. And they're like, oh no, we got to cut our way out. I think they're going to zap us. So
send the droidekas.
Exactly. And I'm like going,
they're coming in the door.
Yeah, so this big explosion, all this stuff is going on, and I'm like going, holy smokes, this is just like eye candy at this scale. I mean, you're just like, every sense is being tapped. It's like I can almost taste the movie.
Misa Jar Jar Binks.
And then I look over at my wife, and she is passed out. She's just completely asleep. I mean, it's like...
From excitement?
Yeah. Holy crap. It was so hilarious. I think I watched it twice.
In the theater while your wife slept?
Oh, yeah. No, just kidding. Just that one day. Yeah. She's still out. I'm still watching. No, we watched it just that one time. And then I went back, I think, with some friends later on.
And this is why I love Star Wars, which I do. I do love Star Wars. But that's not the podcast. We are going to talk about a comic book.
Yeah, a series of comic books. We're going to put the plural into it.
We're going to talk about All-Star Superman.
Bum, 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 bum. I'll give you a great segue. You can just cut out all that Star Wars stuff. Speaking of Superman.
Thanks, yeah. I'll just edit that Star Wars. That'll be a whole different podcast.
Yeah, because we did kind of go on for a while. You can squeeze that one into something else.
It's All-Star Superman. It is by DC Comics. It was published from November of 2005 to October 2008. It is 12 issues. It's written by Grant Morrison, who we've talked about before. Penciled by Frank Quitely, not Quitely. I think it's Quitely.
Or he doesn't do it in secret where no one can hear him. He's quietly.
Yes, and inked digitally by Jamie Grant. Letters Phil Balsman, Travis Lanham, colorist Jamie Grant. Edited by Bob Schreck and Brandon Montclair. And there's a volume 1, volume 2. There's an absolute edition. There's a deluxe edition. Which one do you have, Mike?
I, sir, have the deluxe.
What?
And I do have the individual issues as well. Book's so nice, I've got it twice.
Well, cool. I have the individual issues. I have not bought any other. I just say the word boughten, which is my pet peeve of the word that doesn't exist. Boughten.
Well, irregardless.
Right. Yes. Anyway, I only bought 12 issues, and that was enough for me. All-Star Superman 2005 came out bi-monthly. DC had just decided to, I don't want to say revamp, but it's kind of a revamp. It's a revamp in a non-destructive way.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I kind of did a little extracurricular.
Unfortunately, you did research.
Yeah, I don't know. Usually it's seat of the pants at best. Yeah, I like to do a little improv when I can here or there. And yeah, there was it was this duality of All-Star, obviously being one of the first titles that DC ever produced, but they wanted All-Star characters and All-Star creators. And that was going to be a kind of separate, they can do whatever they want with the All-Star characters and All-Star, because they were like, hey, you're the best of the best. We know you're going to treat the characters right.
Yeah, I mean, we've reviewed Final Crisis by Grant Morrison. You can listen to that podcast. And I am surprised how much I like Grant Morrison now as an older person, older man, because I don't remember being this fond of him when I was younger. Although, I mean, I do have a bit of Grant Morrison stuff. His Justice League, his JLA series was one of my favorite series that he did. His Doom Patrol is really good. So, I mean, I think I've been a hidden fan of Grant Morrison, but as we're rereading these for the podcast, I'm enjoying Grant at a different level, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's a multitude of levels that are in a lot of his writing, where there's a very surfacey, like, hey, check it out, Superman's duking it out with Lex Luthor. That's really cool. Oh, man, that's really neat. But then if you really kind of dive a little bit deeper and read it again, and you can see some of the subtleties, especially if there's like references, and not to go all Umbrella Academy on you, but there are like little clues given in the background art and some other little nods to past incarnations and so forth.
You're going to point out to me as we look through this how much I missed again? Is this another episode of that?
Yeah, one of these things is not like the other.
Right.
And I'm going to point out which one it is. And they were given basically complete freedom to come up with how they would define these characters.
Yeah, and I think you did a good job. Here's my take on this series, the overall take on the series, and we'll get to individual issues in a minute. And you'll find this similar to my take of Final Crisis. I love the first 6 issues of this comic series. The first 6 issues, I think, were genius. Were great, wonderful. I think I sent you an awesome over text.
Yes, that you did.
Okay, so the first 6 issues, I think, was a great take on Superman. I was really enjoying it. I loved how he freshened up character, and it just seemed new but classic. I was all in. And then I got to issue 7 and 8, which was the Bizarro section of the story. And I felt that I didn't enjoy it. I was hoping for a different Bizarro story, maybe. I almost think I didn't get it. Like, there was something that I was missing, like Umbrella Academy. And then, and then back to 9, 10, and 11, I enjoyed it again. It was great. Yeah. It was wonderful. It was back to the old classic and yet refreshing and new. And then issue 12, the last of the series. Much like I felt from Final Crisis, I thought it was quick. I thought it was too short. I think he needed a double-sized issue. I thought it fell flat. I didn't like the way it ended. I thought it had a lot of promise, but I didn't feel fulfilled at the end like I thought I would.
The culmination of everything.
And especially the last few pages, I thought, really? That's it? I'm not sure what I was expecting, but it was a lot more than that. And that's how I both enjoyed it and did not enjoy this series. Now, I remember reading this when it came out, and I loved every minute of it. So in this, unlike Final Crisis, where I think I liked it better the second time I've read it, I think this time I liked it a little less than before.
So in this particular episode is and this is why I like comics and not love comics.
Right, and this is why comics are pretty good.
Yeah, that's interesting because I liked it all, including the end, and I liked the Bizarro thing because it finally kind of like captured Bizarro in a way that like it kept to the John Byrne that it was a failed clone, but then still had the square or cube planet, and like how would that happen? And it's like, oh yeah, it's not on our Earth, so to speak. It's underverse or whatever it was called. And then, and that one interesting refresh take that I liked about the Bizarro one, and not that this would sway you in any way, was that there was even a Bizarro among the Bizarros. That kind of makes sense. It's like this place that's always been kind of portrayed as being a backwards version of like whatever Superman is, there's an opposite. But then what if there was an opposite of the opposite? I thought, that's pretty clever.
Yeah,
And
that's why I didn't like it.
Ah,
I didn't care for that, and I'm grateful that you do.
yeah, and I think what worked for me though was that it was just something that's like the Bizarro world. If you really were to tap into the Bizarro, if everything was truly the opposite, they would say things in reverse, not just the opposite of what they're saying. What would be a Bizarro to the Bizarros? My opinion was there's that. And there's that poignancy of kind of showing like Superman, who was the only remnant of his kind on Earth, but was surrounded by friends. Whereas this Superman was so lonely, because he was the only one, just like Superman on Earth. This was like, I can't relate to anybody. I'm so distant from them. And it's like, so it was just kind of like, what would, if Superman took on depression as opposed to trying to be eternally optimistic, it's like, oh, that's what he would wind up being.
See, you're describing everything I hated about that character. And you liked it.
You can have when we get to talking about Star Wars, I'll let you talk about episode 1 and your interests and my disdain for certain acting capabilities, we'll say.
And I'm glad we both got different things out of it. Really, out of 12 issues, I didn't like 3 of them. So, I mean, I still like 75%.
Yeah, that's passing grade.
Right.
It's in some school systems, it's a C, so that's what they call average.
Right. It's better than I did on math, so I mean, come on.
What was good about it in the second reading was to see the bigger story that was kind of being played out across all 12 issues. Because they, having read them when they were coming out individually, that was one thing. But then you kind of lost track of the bigger, like what's being played out. So having sat down, read all 12, kind of binge reading it, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, now I can see Superman be doing when he has 12 months left. And, his allotment on life is just about to wrap up. What would he do? And that's where it's kind of like, how does he validate himself? How does he validate like his time here? What does he do to try to capture his time left? And yeah, the Bizarro stuff was kind of like, that was kind of like, I think it was probably an issue too long. It was still engaging. It may not have been great. The story, obviously then picks up and carries on from there.
Yeah, the 12 issues, I mean, the basic summary of the 12 issues is Superman in the first issue basically gets solar poisoning and is going to die. And so he has these moments left in his life, like you said, and what is he going to do with his last months on Earth? And that's how the story plays out. We haven't talked about the art at all. Did you enjoy Frank's art, or is it not to your liking?
There was quite a bit that I really, really liked. It reminded me immensely of Jeff Darrow's work and a lot of the detail, especially in the vehicle work and the backgrounds of some certain areas where it's just like elaborate amount of hand-drawn, handcrafted, and not necessarily like with rulers and straight edges, but just detail. And I thought that was great. Like I said, it reminded me a lot of Jeff Darrow, but his figurative work was probably the best part of it. And I think it kind of summed up, in my opinion, how do you differentiate Clark Kent from Superman. and still have where it's expect like Superman's got these big thick arms and he's got the big massive legs and broad shoulders and stuff like that. And how is he supposed to be this mild-mannered reporter from the Daily Planet? And it's like, well, what if he's just this lumbering oaf? And he was able to kind of convey that lumbering oaf aspect by saying, yeah, he slouches and he points his toes inward and he tucks his chin down. So he's always looking down to give himself an appearance of a double chin. And it's like, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
And super hypnosis.
Yeah, there was some, not to jump way ahead, but we'll get to it when we get to that issue, but there's some great references to some of the most obscure elements of Superman lore. And I was like going, dang, he even referenced that. And some of the weird powers that Superman was given during like the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, the art for me was great. I love Frank's art. His Superman is wonderful. Like it's definitely in the top 5 for me of artists who can draw Superman and make him unique but iconic. And I loved his, the supporting cast look. They all look a little different, a little hip. I loved his Jimmy Olsen. He was weird, but funny and unique. And I mean, that some of that was probably Grant Morrison too, with the way he wrote them. I loved the look of everybody. Perry White was great. All the side characters had a distinct look and style. I just thought backgrounds were great. It was he drew exactly what he needed to draw, and it was detailed enough for my liking. And the coloring helped too, I'm sure, because the coloring was really sharp and precise and stood out. Even the Bizarro issues that I didn't like, I thought the art was great.
An interesting take, like, even down to the Bizarros, like the streets are above the houses.
Right. I bet that was a fun couple issues to draw.
Yeah, just go as trippy as you can get. So you want to dive into the issues themselves?
Yeah, let's issue 1. And I like how it opens up and it's the origin of Superman, but it's told in 4 panels. That's all you need. You get it? I think every Batman origin should be like that.
Yeah.
Because I don't need to see it again.
Yeah, how many like pearl necklace moments are you gonna see those hit the ground? And it's like, here we
Theater,
go
pearl necklace, gunshot, he trains. That's it. Boom. And Superman here, same thing. Planet dying, his parents die, he's in a rocket, he's found. That's it.
Yep.
That's it. And then a glorious splash page of the Superman flying by the sun. And that, I mean, just turning the page and looking at that sets the whole series up to be great. And I like it's kind of an older Superman, like experienced. He's got years of history behind him. He's wise, and throughout the series he becomes more powerful since he's souped up by the solar radiation.
Yep, having battled on the surface of the sun.
Right.
Directly on the surface, basically.
Right.
Just overcharged up his batteries, if you would. Yeah, it kind of did, what was that? Was it Samsung phones that the batteries would overcharge and eventually just explode?
Yeah, just start on fire.
So that was basically, Superman became a Samsung battery. And that worked out really well because it does kind of capture Superman through the eras as well. When Superman first began, was like adventure stories. And then it shifted from adventure stories and helping people to weird, bizarre sci-fi stories to more grounded, heroics. If you look at Superman through the decades, and this series kind of follows through all those decades.
Before we go into the issue by issue, I want to know what your favorite issue was.
It really was probably issue 2. The reveal of Superman and Clark Kent, and then all the little subtleties and the setting things up for what was to come. And, and then that reveal at the end, and you just feel like, dang. I mean, issue 2 and 3, it's really the Lois, sections, because even at the end of the Lois one, when it's just he and Lois, kind of like she's passing out, and he's like, well, having exhausted herself from the Superman formula, I was like, this is what it's like to be me. And she's like, well, thanks for that. But I don't think I'd want to have to deal with all that either.
I loved issue 6 where he kind of visits his dad.
True.
In the past, and these other mystery men show up and help at the farm and
His own descendants.
Yeah, I mean, it just was great. And I didn't remember that from my reread.
If you noticed that the Superboy-esque Superman, when the bandaged Superman was there in his presence, he never spoke. As soon as that bandaged Superman is with anybody else, he would speak at that time. I thought that was kind of clever because it's like you kind of almost recognize your own voice, and he didn't want him to be recognized, so he never spoke. But then when he was standing next to Pa Kent and had that chance to kind of chat again, it's like then they would talk.
I have a question on that issue, but we'll get to that. Issue 1 really was just set up. You know, I maybe don't want to go to page by page, but kind of just highlight how good it was and how weird it was at the same time, because it takes place on Earth and by the sun. Quentin is doing an experiment at the sun, and there's this weird Lex Luthor clone creature that Luthor is controlling, trying to sabotage the whole thing. And Superman comes in and saves it, but Superman gets too close to the sun, I guess. Which, I mean, to me, is like, hasn't he done something close to the sun before? And why this time did he have a bad reaction to it? But, you know, it's all based on story, I know. Superman fights this creature and goes into the sun and saves everybody, of course, because he's Superman. Makes him so much stronger. That was half the fun. It's like his strength is tripled at least, and he gets new superpowers. You know, he decides kind of how he wants to spend his last moments, and that's kind of how the issue 1 ends. Again, his Clark Kent is great, clumsy, but I liked how in the entire series, you know, Clark will do things to save people, but it'll be on accident. You know, like he'll catch stuff that was thrown, or in a later issue, he saves Luthor accidentally doing things with his superpowers, you know, so nobody else would notice it. It was really well done. At the end of this issue, Clark tells Lois that he is Superman, and she doesn't believe him.
Which in many ways makes a lot of sense, because it's like, my gosh, this dude has been leading him on all this time. There's no way that bumbling oaf could be Superman as well. But, you know, the other aspects is like it sets just about every story up in this thing. From the Lex Luthor, you can see that he's willing to turn himself in, so he's obviously got another plan for the next steps. Talks about these little microorganisms that are in capsule, to giant bizarros that are helping him out. So it's like absolutely everything that's like the story arcs that will happen over the next few issues were hinted at in some capacity here.
Yeah, Grant Morrison really opens up the possibilities in his stories, you know, with subdimensions and future stories, and he kind of tries to do a little bit of everything, and usually it works for him, which is great.
And one thing I do find kind of comical in some ways is like how often he will transpose one word for another word. And that would be, all of a sudden it's like, wow, that's really kind of cool, just thinking about it like that way. You know, and it was somewhat that way in the Umbrella Academy, when they were talking about how that they would get into this elevator and it would teleport them someplace, and they called it the televator. And it was just like, oh, that's kind of clever. You know what it is, even though you've never heard that amalgam of words before, but it was enough for you to go like, oh, that's really cool. But there's an issue down the road where the Mxyzptlk Superman has a hyperpoon instead of a harpoon in order to capture a creature. And it's like, oh, just that little clever twist was just all that's needed to make it like, you can get away with that in comics. But even if you look on, there's that page where that Quantum guy or whatever is like measuring Superman's strength. They're all done with that. They're leaving the lab. There's like his like created assistant. And it's like, oh, it's like Bach. If only we could find a way to crack the Krypton code, we could grow a second Superman. And it's like, oh, well, there it is. The last page of the book
Right.
is the series is explained in one,
the
the first
book.
book. Everything was already hinted at and given a pretty, like, if you went back and looked, it's like, yeah. I kind of wonder too, and this is just my own supposition about it, that kind of growing creature has clearly, everything else is illuminated by this like purplish light inside of the sun vessel. And there's these green rods that are growing out of its back. And if there's something kryptonite related in that, and that might have caused Superman's protection against all the solar radiation to diminish slightly. To your point, let's say if he were to have been able to survive the surface of the sun, but because of this thing's green, the kryptonite rods, almost like carbon rods in a nuclear reactor, it's dampening some of Superman's immunities. We're at issue 1.
That was issue 1. And these were, they're pretty quick reads, but there's a couple books that are a little slower because they talk more, but it was done very visually, of course.
So off to issue 2.
Secret Identity, Lois Lane. And this, if it's not my favorite issue, is the runner-up, because I agree the 6th issue was great. I loved issue 3, too.
It's the Lois arc. Because there's, three characters that this whole series dwells on and how Superman reacts in his final times. One is, like, the love interest forever. The second one being, then there's a story arc about like Superman and the man who made him more human than Kryptonian, made Superman with the values that he carries, and that's Jonathan Kent. And there's that story arc. And then it ends with the polar opposite of like what Superman could have been if he was more villainous. And then the opposite of he wanted to be Superman. The villain wanted to be Superman. And that's Lex Luthor. So it's really, like Superman wrapping up those key relationships in his life. And so issues 2 and 3 just kind of like focus on the Lois relationship. A couple things that I really liked is obviously, Lois gets taken to the Fortress of Solitude, and they reference the giant key that used to be out there. And then he's like, I updated it. I got a dwarf star and I compressed it into the shape of a key, and only Superman could lift it. So yeah, here it is.
I love that.
And then it was hidden under a mat.
Right.
It's just like physically, like just kind of like, oh yeah, it's right here.
And you see the key again later on. Other super beings can lift it, but nobody else can.
And then, there's that big splash page that has kind of his trophy room. And there's all sorts of relics that you kind of recognize here or there. And you're like, oh, okay, I get it. There was something a little creepy about the chessboard that had all the characters kind of as maquettes standing on it. And I was trying to figure out, I was like, is that good guys versus bad guys? And then it's like, sure enough, it is. It's all of his friends are on one side facing one way. And then the villains are the other way. And clearly, like Lois Lane being kind of the queen, and then technically a Dark Knight is the knight. There's a really weird story, vintage story about that coin, because Batman's got his own penny, and then there's this penny with the Joker face on it, and that's a really bizarre classic story where basically Batman pulls a prank on Superman, and so there's that reference, and then the Bottle City of Kandor.
Right, that's great. I think the only thing that this series was missing, the Superman mythos, was anything Legion related. I was really kind of hoping for a Legion of Superheroes reference, since he was a member as Superboy, and and something futuristic like that would have been great.
Now, do you think that bubble that's in that trophy room, is that a Legion time machine?
Yeah, it might be a time bubble. I don't remember them ever having seats. But, that could just be artist's rendition.
Interpretation of it.
It's possible.
So Lois makes herself comfortable, and then Superman's like, hey, I'll be right back as I gave you a quick tour. When I'm done with this tour, and some of the things that happened during the tour just kind of really showcases like the sheer power level that Superman already had. He had a Sun Eater, and then she's like, oh, what do you feed a Sun Eater? Bits of a sun, and he's just sprinkling it like you would feed a fish.
And then the Sun Eater, now that you say the word Sun Eater, that is a Legion reference.
True.
That's where the Sun Eater came from first, so maybe I just was thinking too hard on it.
Yeah, there is something where you'd like to see, but the Cosmic Boys and the Saturn Girl, those kind of the classic ones, but at the same point, if they were to travel from the past, then what would that do to the Superman squad who travels through time?
Right,
Does it
yeah.
seem like you're double dipping? And then Lois stumbles across a room she should not be in. Woo, spooky. And then they eat on what can only be considered the Titanic.
Yep.
And he's like, yeah, this is a menu from the Titanic. This is a food that would have been from the Titanic. And it's like, holy cats, he's got the Titanic and the Fortress of Solitude. Superman's trying to explain after he's revealed his identity as being Clark Kent. And she does not believe him. And no matter what he does, she's not following it. And she's completely under the mindset that he is not Clark. And this is just Superman playing a prank of sorts. And there was a really cool, small image, but it was a cool image of Superman reflecting himself in that mirror that showed like the true self. And then he dresses and slumps like he would if he was Clark Kent. Just slouches over and does his whole Clark Kent. But the truth is that he is still and always will be Superman. Glasses are gone. The posture is correct. Everything in that reflection is truly shows him as being, yeah. You may try to pass yourself off as a human. You may try to present yourself as being more or less your average Joe. You're still a human. And it goes back to, I think we talked about this, off podcast, but that great, it was like the comic book quiz book or something like that Jerry Robinson wrote.
Yeah.
And it had that question of what makes Superman different than Batman and, the Flash and so forth. And it was like Superman disguises himself as Clark Kent, whereas the others are Bruce Wayne disguising himself as Batman. And it was just like, he's that hero all the time where the others have to turn into that hero. And this on its own kind of clearly defined that. Lois gets a little bit more freaky, a little bit more paranoid, a little bit more schizo. And then she tries to sneak into the room and comes across both the mirror of truth and the communicator and talks to the unknown Superman. And, just kind of like asks some really questions about like Superman and her and their future together. And she's like realizes that Superman doesn't want her in that room because she's going to be experimented on. Superman brought her up there to just kind of do some sort of like freaky experimentation. And then so she grabs that kryptonite laser and is ready to just take Superman out to save her own hide. So when the doors open up, she zaps him. And then Superman realizes that he's now so powerful that kryptonite doesn't even faze him. And then he explains, well, that room that you saw that you thought I was going to do some dissections is actually me just trying to figure out how to make it so that I can get this Christmas or birthday gift for you. And that was basically, you get to be Superwoman for the day. And that harkens back to all of those. I mean, like the entire run of Superman's Girl, Lois Lane comics from the 50s, 40s and 50s. And it's like she always became Superwoman.
Right.
And so this was a great like kind of reference back to that classic era.
Yeah.
So that was
Jimmy
issue 2.
Olsen. Yeah. Issue 2 was great. He draws a sexy Lois Lane.
Mighty fine.
That's right. So issue 3 is all about Lois Lane becoming powerful for 24 hours. She takes the serum that Superman has synthetically created and becomes Superwoman and even gets a costume and everything like that. So she gets to spend the next 24 hours as a super person. What was great about this issue was Grant Morrison brought back Samson and who was the other guy?
Atlas.
Atlas, yeah.
But originally it was, I believe, Hercules in the vintage, like Silver Age comics. It was, I think, it was Samson and Hercules. Yeah, it was those two.
Yeah.
So Atlas was kind of like a stand-in because I don't know if there was like some other issues with Hercules being in the Marvel as well that they just wanted to kind of
showed them as time travelers, and they've traveled around and they know that Superman is dying and they want to try to get Lois Lane to date them. So it's kind of a dating Superwoman issue, which was a lot of fun. They kind of mentioned that Superman does these 12 acts of heroism, kind of these 12 tasks before he dies throughout the rest of the series, they kind of point out which one this one was, and what he still had to do. So it was a nice little tie-in to kind of tie all the books together.
That's probably why they didn't have Hercules. I didn't make that connection until you said it out loud. It's like that only makes sense. It's like, Hercules had his legendary
Quests.
tasks that were assigned to him to do. And so to have Hercules here and then say that Superman had to do the same thing, it's like, yeah, you're just following one of these characters.
Right.
By swapping out Hercules. Yeah. Duh. It's all starts to come together.
Samson and Atlas, they were interesting characters. Don't remember reading much about them prior. And I don't know if they're, like, Grant Morrison just pulled them and they're clones of the characters that were talked to before, or they were just given an update. I think Samson had this, like, superpowered jet car.
Yeah, his chronomobile or whatever.
Yeah, so that was kind of neat. So they go about trying to impress Lois Lane. It's her birthday, so they're kind of just playing around. But Superman, in this issue, first sees the headline, Superman dead, in the Daily Planet of the future. And, so he knows this event's going to happen. And he gets 12 super challenges. It states what he does. He creates life. He escapes from the underverse. He overthrows a tyrant son. He answers the unanswerable question. And then they have this interesting, like, the Sphinx as a villain come in, and Superman has to answer this question as one of his feats and to save Lois, and of course does. I'm not going to spoil the riddle or anything like that, but it's an interesting story. Even becomes more interesting when it ends up being a arm wrestling match between Superman and those two, and Superman kicks their butt, like breaks Samson's arm, like twists it around and shows how powerful he is. And then Lois and Superman have a romantic time on the moon, and they talk about how he sees the world, which kind of hints to the future too, and how he sees different things, different lights and sounds and everything. And then her day is done, and the issue is done as well. It was even looking back at it, I can't get enough of the art, and the story is just really good.
Yeah, the subtleties in the faces, the subtleties in the emotions, like even, that was a key frame, at least one that stuck in my head, was when it was kind of, they're both in the underground thing. One was right after Samson shows the headlines, and Samson walks away going like, hey, I know you're gone. It's like, I got one up on you because I'm going to be alive and you're not. And then Superman's just kind of standing there, kind of looking off into space, trying to contemplate like, yeah, this is definitive. It is definitive. And Samson plays dirty. And it's just that interchange in that one frame was great. And the other one where they're like going, even the S on his back is yellow. And Superman, you could almost feel how quickly he turned his head. It's like, okay, that's enough. And you're like, oh crap, game's on now.
Right.
Those two have just really screwed things up.
Just pushed too far.
Yep, one step too far. But yeah, even the arm wrestling, they're on this isolated island or some sort of archipelago, and just the arm wrestling is so intense that it is causing it to crumble. And by the end, there's very little of that island left. Many eruptions are happening, and volcanoes are popping out because of the shifting of the tectonic plates or whatever. And it's like, dang. But yeah, so well done. Great pacing, great story. The sad thing was like, clearly, he's got a question for her, and it's like, will you? Oh, and she's out.
You're right. Yeah.
So the hoping for that one solidify that relationship after all this time, because there's clearly, history there. And then to show the gentlemanliness that he is, it's like, yeah, more or less, like, here, I'll tuck you in, give you a peck on the forehead. And so as to just, again, not somebody who would take advantage of even, the love of his life. And with months to live, walks away.
Good night, Lois.
Then we're on to, this kind of takes on a unique approach to Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah, I love it.
And what's great about it is that instead of this like kid who always gets himself into trouble, it makes Jimmy into somebody where you could see like, yeah, I think I understand now why Superman would kind of call him his pal. It's like, yeah, this dude will just do anything. He's open for whatever, always out for an adventure and, kind of living life as best as you can live it. And Superman, just sees that level of humanity, that potential. And that's where it's like, so it's not just this little punk kid that Superman kind of like sympathizes for. It's actually like, no, I don't mind actually hanging out and calling him Superman's pal.
Right. He's cool and different, and I really wish they'd use this version of Jimmy Olsen from now on.
Or if you're Zack Snyder, you can kill him off in first 10 minutes of your movie.
Right.
Yep. And not use him ever again. But this is the introduction of the Underverse. So Jimmy Olsen basically gets to, his gimmick at the Daily Planet is not like a cub reporter, but it's like, I get to be a, something for a day. So for 24 hours, he gets to be whatever.
Kind of like Lois.
She got her chance to be Superman. Well, he's got his chance to be the head of one of the most industrial, scientific, advanced organizations for a day. He even got to wear the basically coat of many colors. So then they're working on the Underverse thing, and the gravity is so intense in this Underverse that it pulls down construction crew, and Jimmy is just about to go with it. Instantly, Superman comes to his aid.
He's got the signal watch.
And it's even with Superman and all his power, it does cause quite a strain for him to fight the gravitational pull. And they extract black kryptonite from this Underverse. Somehow a piece of Krypton got sucked into the gravity well and converted over to this black kryptonite.
That Krypton blew up everywhere.
Yeah, it distributed itself just about everywhere. And I do like the fact that they kind of explain what black kryptonite does, and they don't just say like, oh, I wonder what it does, and they're trying to suppose, and it's like, I'm immune to green kryptonite, and it's like, I think I'm fine. And then you start to see that Superman's shifting from being the nice, neat, but he's kind of getting a little bitter, and he's vandalizing a desk, and then he's arrogant about it. It's like, hey, I just increased the value of this thing, because of it. Kind of becomes a jerk, and then goes from jerk to being like a menace, and then goes from a menace to like, this is going to be really bad. And sure enough, Superman goes kind of on a rampage. It's basically more or less going to destroy, everything he had done, he's doing the reverse of. And that kind of hints towards what is in the Underverse, and that's that whole Bizarro. So it's kind of like, if the Underverse is the opposite, then it's going to be that Kryptonite would make the opposite happen. So it's basically turning Superman from good to bad. So if Superman happened to be bad, he would have made him good. And then, of course, Jimmy Olsen, being Jimmy Olsen, does what he did in all his comics of Jimmy Olsen, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, injects himself to transform into some weird creation. Because he was like a turtle monster in one of those classic issues way back when. Yeah.
Well, this was like a doomsday type serum.
Yeah. And wound up becoming Doomsday, which was a good, because they even reference that. What's behind this wall? It's the Doomsday device. It only be used on the worst of occasion. So he becomes that and beats the tar out of Superman.
Yeah, it crushes him.
Yeah, with just enough. And as the power or the Doomsday thing wears off, Superman's defeated and he returns to being his normal self. Jimmy Olsen is back to his normal self, and we all live happily ever after, although he got to keep the jacket after all. So that adds to his quirky wardrobe, and he's got those like costumes in his, on display in his apartment. Actually has a cool side, and he leaves the series with having inscribed "I love Lucy," his girlfriend's name, on the surface of the moon. So it's kind of like, hey, that's fun. If you're a fan of The Tick, I was hoping to have seen a hop on there from Chairface Chippendale.
Right.
I Love Lucy's on the moon, kind of similar to the show back in the day. But yeah, that was that issue.
Yeah, Grant Morrison has kind of a running theme about superpowers and how except for Superman. Humans can have them, but they're very short-lived. Lois only had it for 24 hours. Jimmy Olsen's transformation didn't last very long either. And then later on, Lex Luthor gets some powers and stuff, and that doesn't last very long either.
And it leads to the final issue. And I know that I keep coming back to, I'm not trying to change your mind on it, but it's like, what happened with Lois when she got the powers, and how did she see the reality? She could no longer smell the pine trees in Canada or whatever it was. Even at the end, there was that level of like somewhat remorse with the power gone, but how it changed them. Jimmy became Doomsday and had to beat up his best friend. How that kind of changed him a little bit. And then ultimately at the end of the series, what happens when Lex Luthor gets powers? Now on to the next episode.
You're not going to convince me.
No worries.
I mean, what you said was factual, but I just think I didn't enjoy the end. Issue 5 was a really good issue, too. It's, Lex Luthor is in jail. He is sentenced to death in a future comic. He wants his last remaining couple days to be reported by Clark Kent and have him follow him around and interview him. And Clark is in prison with Lex for a day or whatever. And while Lex is scheming, and you just know in the background he's got some plans and it's not going to go down quietly, he walks around the prison with Clark. The best scenes in here were while they were walking around, Clark counters the parasite who can absorb powers at a distance. Like, he doesn't have to touch him either. He feels him nearby, and suddenly the parasite is just bulked out with this superpower because Superman is supercharged and just starts fighting everywhere. Starts messing with the whole prison, and Clark, who can't turn into Superman because that would disclose his secret identity, he's trying to save people, and Lex, by doing all these things in secret, just using super speed and smoke that he creates and all these things that he's doing. It's really clever the way Grant Morrison wrote this. Frank did a really good job drawing it as well. I liked Lex Luthor a lot in this one. He seems really smart. Might not be my favorite take of Lex Luthor. I kind of like the Byrne Lex Luthor better, the businessman kind of thing. But I love the mad science Lex Luthor as well. He's creating these things. I'm not sure why the guards let him do all this stuff, like what free pass he's got that he can maneuver around and create all this science experiments, which he's going to use later to bail himself out. There was a HeroScape ad in these, and it was a HeroScape comic in the middle there that I enjoyed reading. So Superman saves Lex from the parasite, though the weirdest part of this was towards the end, where Lex he already has his escape plan ready, or at least he had a potential escape plan, but it was more to save Clark and I think it's his niece or something like that, who kind of is this future supervillainess in training that Lex is training, which kind of, to me, hints at some of the Superman movies, where, I don't know if it was Superman 4, where Lex had this assistant.
Not Mrs. Tessmacher!
Right. Lex declares that he is going to kill Superman, and he knows that he's dying, and that's pretty much how the issue ends. It was a pretty quick read.
Quite a bit going on in that issue.
Yeah. A lot of hints and stuff, future issues we'll pick up on, and you'll see what Lex has been scheming about.
Well, I'll let you recap the next issue, certainly, because this one was the most, you lost your dad, I lost my dad. That's where this one is like, this is a hard read.
Yeah, it was probably my favorite issue. It starts out with Superman and Clark. It's got crypto in it, so that's cool. But it's more like a father-son moment in time. Got all the right moments. It's weird. It's really hard to describe this issue because it is a flashback kind of thing. It's like Clark is about ready to leave the farm. That this is the time that he's finally moving on and gonna go do some things. What you find out is it's the day that Pa Kent dies. He gets visited by these 3 mystery helpers who you later find out are from the future descendant of Clark, which does raise some questions about the end of this series. And they visit to kind of witness this last day, and there's a secret thing behind it all that you get to later. The strange Mr. Mixoplick Superman, I'm not sure if that was ever explained later in a different series or anything like that.
Well, he does reference that. That was when Superman of this place married Fifth Dimension or whatever lady.
It's really cleverly done. You see what Grant Morrison later did with Superman 1 million. There's a Superman from 853,500 AD. And they meet, and then there's the unknown Superman who you saw in a previous issue talking to Lois Lane in the fortress. And there's this weird time creature that they're chasing throughout. It's called the Chronovore with the Hyperpoon. He's got to capture him. And so they're trying to capture this creature. What they're really doing is distracting, I guess, Superman while his father dies. Clark's father gets to talk with the unknown Superman, and Jonathan suffers a heart attack while Superman is helping fight this Chronovore. And then he does notice that he can't hear Pa's heartbeat anymore. So there's a funeral, and even the other Supermen go and visit, mourning the passing of Pa. And you see that it does in fact tie in with the issue, because the unknown Superman was Superman of our story, who was dying, who went back in time, and this was another part of his 12 heroics that he had to do. Now my question is, this futuristic Superman that comes out with these other two super people, and he's all in gold. Mm-hmm. In my mind, that implies that that's Superman from a future time after this story takes place. So I read that right. I guess that's one of my points, is I wasn't even sure if that's where he was going with that or not. And then I thought, was that ever touched upon later on, that he was gold? Was it the last few pages of the last issue, he was in the sun? Not to spoil it.
Yeah, we're going to spoil the whole thing anyway at this point.
If you haven't read All-Star Superman and you've got to this point in the podcast, you've already been spoiled. And you shouldn't be surprised that I just spoiled the ending. But it was a good issue. Like you said, it kind of hits home in many ways, because we've both lost our fathers.
And yeah, there was a lot of little subtle play here or there, because that, unknown Superman had appeared in the first issue, talking to Lois, and not the second issue, technically.
Yeah.
Talking to Lois. And then it focuses on the fact that Superman actually is vulnerable. He's got infinite powers available to him, especially after that solar blast. But it's like one of the biggest complaints any writers have, or people have, saying that Superman's too powerful. There's nothing, you can't do anything to him. It's like there's no stories to be told because he's so powerful. What can harm him? And it's like these two story arcs so far show how vulnerable he really is as a living kind of granted it's a fictional character. He's still a person that has connections, emotional connections. And, the first one with Lois, calling out Superman, he runs right out there, right into danger. He could have clearly seen that she had the kryptonite gun, but he didn't even bother to x-ray vision to see, what kind of thing is out there. He just ran right out there and right into danger because Lois had that much power over him. But Lois is just a very, very much a mortal woman. A human that he has that much of a connection with, as such, leaves himself vulnerable. And then here, the death of his father also tears at him and has a gut punch and a weakening for Superman. And it's just these stories of infinite powers, but what about the man in Superman? What happens to that person? And, that's where I think these story arcs really touch home and tell you that, there's still plenty of relevant stories that can be done based off of Superman. He could do all these things, and he was ready to fight a creature that can eat time. Even that didn't help. He could do it. He fell short.
Issue 7 and 8, feel free to review both those type.
Well, we'll make it quick because we kind of hinted a little bit at him, but this is Superman fighting the Bizarro. So this is kind of recapturing some of the sci-fi adventures that Superman had when he'd go out into outer space in the 50s and 60s. So again, the crazy intelligent scientist dude gets himself into a pickle and only Superman can come to the rescue. And as Superman's fighting a Sun Eater, and he's flying back and gets confronted by a bunch of Bizarros that fling him back to Bizarro World, and he's trapped there while these other Bizarros are having a rampage on Earth. So Superman's kind of bouncing all over the place as far as like where is he currently, but you get the sense of this is just how Superman and the Bizarros interact. So he's saving people while being stuck on Bizarro Planet, and there's kind of this duality of stories going at once. All of his friends are in jeopardy. They jump on a Happy Holidays blimp to save themselves while the scientist barricades himself behind and tries to take out these Bizarros, which are more or less an equivalent of a zombie at this point. The Bizarro Planet is in orbit over the Earth, so he can zip back and forth, helps rescue his friends, basically says, okay, I put you in safety, I'll be right back, and takes off to Bizarro World. That pretty much wraps up, with the exception of what I kind of mentioned earlier, is that with Bizarro World being the exact opposite, they say, hello instead of goodbye. They say goodbye instead of hello. Whatever they do is opposite. I thought it was clever. You thought the opposite. So you're the Bizarro of my Bizarro of the Bizarro World, and that's
you leave me out of this.
The introduction of what a Bizarro would be on an equivalent of a Bizarro on a Bizarro World, and that would be a normal Superman. And so that's where Zibarro comes about.
But there already is a normal Superman. It's Superman.
Yeah. I did like the fact that this, instead of having a cape, he had a shirt. So I thought that was kind of like, just kind of like his superhero costume was made up of ordinary clothes, more or less.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of clever.
I'm not saying it wasn't well done.
No, but it was fun. So that wraps up that issue. The next issue, it continues, which is kind of like, everybody kind of got a 2-issue story arc up to this point. Superman has to get his way off of this planet. It's got a red sun that's taking all of the strength away that prevents him from flying and so forth. So he's stuck. But apparently it wasn't enough to drain his body of the super energy that's causing him to die, but
right. I was going to mention that.
It's like, the red sun should have depleted that out of him, but
right.
They find how to, Superman's trying to figure out how to get off of that because the gravitational pull is too much for him. And he more or less, and I kind of like this aspect is like, if you guys are the opposite, I will talk about the opposite to trick you into doing what you think is the opposite, and you'll do it the way I want you to. And so Superman, smart as he is like going, no, listen to me. And then he's like going, oh, me am no want, you am listen. And he's trying to because he's like going, wait, listen to me. And then he realizes, oh, crap, I can't say it that way. I have to say it this way in order to appeal to the backwards minds of Bizarros. And by saying it the opposite way, he actually gets their attention and enlists their aid. They all agree by saying boo. They don't like it. Yeah. And then they start helping him build. And Superman just becomes a mess. Worn out. He has almost nothing left to him. And they ultimately give him a rocket ship. While this is all going on, it gets really, really trippy with songs being played and Zibarro more or less kind of being a downer Debbie. Superman says, okay, strap me to this rocket ship that we had the Bizarros make and fire me off into space so I can get away from here. And poof, off he goes, and leaving the Bizarros to kind of basically crumble into dust unattended.
Boo. I mean, yes.
That's Bizarro saying great.
I mean, once you described it, I was much happier just, with the title and the books and stuff. So you described it perfectly. I still didn't enjoy the books, but I think the Bizarro, I just wasn't ready for that kind of story. I don't know. I still feel like it took away from everything else, even though they used some of it. Grant Morrison needed something to take Superman away for a while for the next storyline to come back. He was on the Bizarro planet for a while, and that gave the next couple characters time to establish on Earth. And so he came back and really, as the reader, learned about these two as we did, which kind of made it for a better story. So I'll accept the Bizarro world just because it helps issue 9 really take off. Issue 9, Superman comes back, but there apparently is 2 other Kryptonians that have set up shop on the Earth, and they're really like the police force of the planet, which this story kind of took me back to my childhood, because there was a Power Records book from 1976 or something like that, with a story that was called, I'm trying to think what it was, Super Cop, or no, The Best Cop in the World. And it was about a cop from Kandor, thinking he can do better than Superman on Earth. So he comes out of Kandor and starts being a super cop, and it doesn't work out the way he wants to, but it really tells the story of other Kryptonians' opinions of Superman, and it kind of reminded me of that story a bit. I'm not sure if Grant meant to do that. Kind of fun to see that. So these 2 superhero, which are, they're descendants of Superman. Or wait, are they? They're ancestors of Superman because they're from the past.
Yeah. Yeah, they predated.
Yeah.
And because it was a very different, Superman had 2 things that these guys were not. He was born of scientists and was raised by bright moral people from Smallville, Kansas. And whereas these are clearly, militant and, superior people.
Right.
So it's kind of like the opposite of science is the military kind of brute force, and the opposite of, the humble, modest Midwest mentality versus the arrogance.
And they're super arrogant, no pun intended. And they've taken over the fortress and have just demolished everything. They feel they're stronger than Superman, which I have to argue, in Superman's heightened state, I bet you they shouldn't have been able to push him around as much as they did. Crack the moon, they battle each other, and Superman really wants them to use their powers. And eventually it turns out that they've absorbed, I'm not sure how Superman figured this out, but during their travels to Earth, they absorbed some weird radiation that was killing them, and they had to be sent to the Phantom Zone. They end up policing the Phantom Zone forever, or something like that.
Yeah, they basically, their ultimate wish was fulfilled. They wanted to be around Kryptonians. They're around Kryptonians. And they wanted to be rulers. Well, now they're rulers. So again, Superman can take any situation and make it a positive. There's smackings of, I think you mentioned Superman 2, where Terrence Stamp, General Zod, and so forth, and they kind of address that issue.
Kneel before Zod.
Yeah. You and your, I think he says heirs, but it doesn't sound like heirs.
Right.
If you listen to it, it definitely does not sound like heir. It's kind of a one-off, but again, it's kind of a cautionary tale of what Superman could be, but it just helps almost say how great Superman is as a character, because this is what it could have been. The true, if I had all this power, what I could do, and why wouldn't I? And we're moving quickly towards the end.
Issue 10.
So this one zips right in with, I wouldn't say it was a disjointed storyline, but it's basically told as a series of flashbacks as Superman is reaching the final phases of his time, and he's using basically a mental projector to write his remaining thoughts onto slabs of metal, kind of a deal to kind of forever capture the mind and thoughts of Superman. They flash back and forth to what is he doing? Oh, he's saving a busload of kids and transporting them over, and the kids are super happy. And then it kicks over to, he's visiting the bottled city of Kandor. Well, he's not, but he's having his scientist friend visit. And I did like how most every interpretation of the super Kryptonians was represented as if there was some other type of clan, because he refers to like, so there's like the classic golden age look of Kryptonians. There's clearly the Kryptonians that were from the previous issue, kind of the Frank Quitely approach. And there's even a panel that's got all the unique headdress that Byrne had introduced as the look of Kryptonians. So it was kind of a nice thing. And then a tip to the way back of, was it Flamebird or Firebird? What was the name of Superman when he would go into, or Batman? Was it Batman when he'd go into Battle City of Kandor?
It was Nightwing and Flamebird.
Flamebird, that's what it was. I was trying to remember, but it's a nice little tip the hat to that era. It's like, okay, he's off. So the scientist is off doing that. And then Superman is trying to figure out what would happen. He's no longer there. So he basically creates a universe where he isn't there and was never there. And then, so that's one of those tasks of he actually creates life.
Are you saying that Superman created the new universe?
Yeah. So if you like DP7, you can thank Superman for that. Yeah, Night Mask and Spitfire. Starbrand, yeah. It was Kickers Inc. I think that was part of it as well. The football heroes turned superheroes.
Thanks, Superman.
Yep, he done did it. So, and then it's like the Toy Man, basically, but they never really call him out as a Toy Man, but he's got Alzheimer's, but makes one more toy, saves Lois. And I thought this was a scene, this one singular page, and it references just a throwaway line that was towards the front of the book, but it's like, this lady in passing is like, stay in the apartment, I'm on my way. And you're just thinking like, oh, it must have been just somebody to explain, like, yeah, it was a hectic time being on this monorail that was about to go off the rails, but Superman stopped the vehicle and she was able to just like, oh, I'm heading home, I'll be there in a moment. But then it pays off a few pages later where this girl who clearly, this goth girl, is like, yep, I've had it with the world, drops her phone because she's like, yep, that's it. She's about to say her goodbyes. And then instantly Superman shows up. And of all the things he does, he just holds her and basically says that the world isn't as bad as it is. And it's that kind of like Superman stopped a train from derailing, saved, hundreds of lives from that train. And then here he spends that time to kind of console this girl. And it's like, it just shows you that Superman is the Boy Scout, is the good guy, but there's a reason. And it's like, man, that was so cool. That page kind of like summed up what Superman is. The hero for everybody. And then they go back to the Battle City of Kandor, which gives you a hint of kind of Mon-El, I guess.
Yeah, it sure does look like it.
From the old Legion. So there's a slight Legion reference. Superman starts kind of locking down his DNA sequence by using his X-ray or microscopic vision, and the world kind of like fixes, to be kind of like, what will happen when he's gone? Superman then kind of ends with a quick trip around to kind of one more chance to talk to the Luthor, one more chance to wrap these other things up. But he does get all those little Battle City of Kandor people to try to help rescue and reverse the cancer in himself, only to find out that that's not going to work. And this is where one of the more obscure powers comes about, was that he brought some friends to help these kids, and basically like you could tell that these little microscopic Kandor people were going to help cure these kids in the hospital. But there was an issue. It's a classic where Superman shoots a mini version. It was from the 60s, I think. Yeah, the 60s. Shoots a mini version of himself out of his hands. And while that version of him, this like 6-inch long Superman, is outside of his body, Superman himself doesn't have any of his powers, but all of his powers have been transferred into that little guy.
It's very Freudian.
Yeah. So it's a bizarre, like, why would they ever thought that would have been a power? It never stuck. It never went, I don't think, a single issue more. But yeah, if you look up Superman shooting a Superman out of his hand, this is even referencing that. So again, Grant Morrison's knowledge and how to incorporate knowledge is amazing. And if you look in the hospital when he comes back, there's a kid drawing of Superman leaping over the Daily Planet on the wall. So again, leaping a tall building in a single bound, kind of classic, which leads to Earth Q. And then they kind of zoom in on Earth Q and it shows somebody kind of like, what if we did this? And how that they, even though Superman didn't exist in that world as a person, it was going to exist as a form of fiction. And then finally, Lois gets the article, Superman Dead by Clark Kent. Kind of wraps up that particular issue.
Yeah, I think this whole series should have ended on the Superman and Earth Q being drawn by Siegel and Schuster.
Yeah, that it may not live on in this universe, but it's picked up in some other universe in some other way. That legacy will always continue.
Yeah, I think that would have been cool. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about Superman creating another universe to experiment, and then like what happened to that universe and where did it go? Is there another story somewhere? I'm sure there is, where they should explain what happened to it.
That's basically referencing our universe.
Yeah, Earth Prime.
Okay. Yeah, it's like this is where we all live. The
Superman created Earth Prime.
Yep, afraid so.
And the new universe. Well, there was a lot to that issue. It had layers. That issue had layers and layers and layers. I liked that one a lot. Like I said, if this whole series ended on that, I think I would have been very happy. Issue 11 is pretty much a Luthor setup for the last issue. Luthor is electrocuted, but gains the powers for 24 hours. I mean, I guess
thank you, Dr. Seuss.
Of Superman, and busts out of jail, killing people, and Superman is like giving his robot Superman instructions on what to do with the animals. Talk to the animals once he's gone. It's kind of a setup, and then he changes his costume, Superman does, and becomes, I don't know, it's just a weird S that he has on that costume, but he goes and fights the Tyrant's son, who is this creature that Grant Morrison uses against. I'm trying to think where he used it, whether it was in this JLA it was his 1 million series he did for DC. He used the Tyrant's son again. So he does recycle that, and he fights this. And of course, as Grant Morrison does, he uses things he's brought up in the past, and the Sun Eater attacks the Tyrant Son, and there's a big battle. Superman saves the world, but I think the Tyrant Son kind of changes the sun. Clark and Superman will have to do something about it the next issue, which kind of what we talked about already. Lex Luthor has to fight Superman, and that all next issue in number 12.
Bum, bum, bum.
No!
The grand finale. I would have said a year in the making since it's only 12 issues, but yeah, it didn't get done in 12 months. There was some dramatic pauses in between the run to get to issue, 12 to reach that issue. But yeah, it was, a great issue. There's a part of me that wanted to kind of like, is that 1100100? Is that, I mean, it obviously has binary code of some sort, but yeah, I've not bothered to check to see, does that translate into anything?
I'm sure it does, but yeah, I haven't bothered either.
Yeah.
That's really a lot of work.
Yeah. Jumping out to number 12.
Explain to me this issue in a way that I will appreciate it more and more.
Yeah. One of the things, and I don't know if this was intentional, but part of me would like to think it is, but they get into, so Superman and Jor-El kind of like jump into a vehicle. And to me, right out of the gates, that vehicle reminded me of the Supermobile.
Yeah.
Because that red fin and the blue body, it's like, yes, the classic Supermobile. But they're all wearing these mental apparatuses that we've seen before in a couple of issues where obviously this is some sort of mental connection that's going on. Superman's trying to, sort things out. And Lex Luthor is looming over the fine folks in the Daily Planet. And he's like going, yeah, I got gobs of power. You know, I can do whatever I want and I'm going to do it. Clark is dead apparently, but then comes back to life. They couldn't find any pulse or anything, but then he comes back to life and Superman, they're all duking it out back and forth. And then Clark Kent pulls out the ultimate weapon, and that is simply his gravity gun, and zaps Lex with a gravity gun, which gets him off the Daily Planet, keeps his friends safe.
Was the gravity gun in an earlier issue?
Not that I recall. Okay. Apparently it was just something he kept at the place just for such an emergencies, because they also reference the fact that there's a spare Superman suit. And this is where the Jeff Darrow connection to me really is most evident, when that semi-truck smashes into Lex Luthor and he doesn't move an inch. But all that broken glass, all the machinery, all the little bits and pieces and the crumpling. It's like, that's Jeff Darrow. You know, again, zap, gravity gun, flings Lex, and you can see Superman clearly putting in what looks like a miniature sun inside of this gun, right, in order each time, like loading the clip, and he's hiding behind a lead line safe to keep himself hidden. Since Lex has got all of his powers, he's going to be able to see where Superman's hiding. So that was pretty cool. And then, you know, a couple more zaps, getting ready to throw him into the ground, deeper into the ground, but Superman's seen better days and Lex is reveling in all this power. But, you know, this is where in the past, when other humans had received immense powers, something happens, something changes. And this is
immense responsibility?
Yeah, one would call it that without copyright infringement. But, you know, it's that level of, like, one of the other reasons why Superman is how he is and how he acts and doesn't want to take over the world is the fact that he can see such an extra level to things that humans can't. You know, this interconnection between all things, and Lex starts to realize it, and he starts understanding how everybody is truly connected, and we're not, you know, even if you wanted to take over the world, it's like, but we're all connected. And it's like he has this epiphany moment. Not that there's necessarily like, you know, I changed. Tell me, boy, what day is it? It's Christmas Eve. The ghosts have done it in one night. This Scrooge-like moment of realization, and it goes from being the miser to he's as good as his word and was, you know, held the holiday better than most, or whatever those lines were in the Dickens story. But
hey, savings and loan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't you know me, Mary? Don't you know me?
Yeah. Hello, movie theater. Lex kind of comes to this, you know, epiphany and sees not necessarily the error in his ways, but sees how insignificant, even with his powers, he really is. Then Superman's like going, yep. And Superman's face starts to really show that things are in their final stages.
He's cracking.
Yeah, and starting to split, glows emanating, and with a few punches, Superman pretty much takes Lex out. Superman and Lois have their final farewell, and Superman realizes that, yeah, the sun was stopped, and it's no longer going to the Earth and everything in the solar system working. He alone basically, he took all that power from the sun in the very first issue and is using himself to restart the sun. So all that stored energy he had kickstarts the sun back, saves the world through sacrificing himself, being truly Superman, always out to save everybody, even at the cost of himself.
One might say he's a super son.
Oh, man.
Boom.
There it is. There it is. And then there's that full page of him basically working the inner machinery of the sun to get it going and keep it going. So he's still technically alive, but all that glow from the sun is coming from Superman. And he's kind of transformed to his next stage, and that is simply to forever be working to get the sun up and running.
But it's not forever, because we know he comes back.
He does. from what year? It was like 85,000 or something like that. And then it finally ends with what was hinted at by the two people that hinted at it. And that was simply, if we could only clone, Superman, if we could have only cracked that Kryptonian code, that finally gets that payoff, that single line of dialogue gets the payoff at the very end where the question mark of Project question mark becomes the number 2, which looks awfully a lot like a question mark. The one thing, and I will say this only because I feel like so much time, so much effort and everything else was put into this. The coloring was really good. It was consistent, except for the fact that Lois's skin color kept getting darker and darker and darker as the series continued. And I don't know if it's just, I was going to say getting a tan from being in Superman's presence. I don't know. Graphically speaking, everything else was so good, except for the titles. There was something about that, the way that was written. Oh my gosh, I don't like. It's just that blue with that slight yellow gradient to that light blue. And it's got just, it was kind of like somebody understood that they can make 3D vector in Photoshop, and they just typed the letters in Photoshop, extruded, and made that graphic. And it's like, ugh. And it's just that color combination. And so when the series ends, it has that end in that kind of gradient, and it's just like, oh no. I didn't want it to end on that particular graphic. It could have just ended as like, I'm sure we'll think of something. And he looks up and is like, Project question mark or 2, and clearly indicating Superman 2 Electric Boogaloo. And that's the end of the 12-issue series.
His love letter to Superman.
All in all, it was well done. It was a good take on Superman. It was very reminiscent of when you get a good writer who understands what is at the core of Superman. There's plenty of Superman stories to tell. Grant Morrison's one of them, and I think another one, and we may at some point get to it, but that is the Man of All Seasons, Superman Man of All Seasons, the Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale 4-issue series. That also was a great take on basically saying, like, here's what Superman's like. Here it is in its essence, if you would.
Yeah, there's a big difference between a regular Superman writer and then what you notice that the masters do, the Alan Moores, the Grant Morrisons.
Yeah.
They just take it to a different level, and I've never realized how good they are until these rereads. And even issues I didn't like, Bizarro stuff, they were really well done. They were drawn well. I know I got what Grant was trying to do for the most part, and I enjoyed them. They were still better than a lot of other issues I've read. The whole series was pretty remarkable. I know it won some awards, an Eisner Award, a Harvey Award, I think. It was really well done. It's too bad that they didn't do a second series of this. I know he used his ideas for some other things, which probably made those better, but I really would have liked to have seen another 12 issues maybe. I think as a catalog of Superman stories that are good, this ranks up right up there, top 5 probably, of not only great story, but one that new readers could follow no problem and still enjoy it. Old readers could. Like, it stands the test of time. It kind of does the Tom Strong universal story for everybody kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you felt that there was a sense of history to this version, as well as that there was this wrapping up, and the instant familiarity with these characters, even though some of them we may never, if I was a new reader, so like we had Kevin on the previous podcast, if he were to read this, he would get it. He'd know who Jimmy Olsen is, even though he has no idea who Jimmy Olsen is. This was that well done that every character felt fleshed out and had a meaning. It wasn't just like, I threw in this character because I wanted a cameo. But they had a meaning as to why they were there. I think you were wondering about the future descendants and how is that possible, and he, clearly said he couldn't be with Lois. He does obviously give he cracked his own genetic code and gave that to that crazy scientist dude and said to hand these over to Lois because she'll know what to do, kind of basically.
Wait, so the scientist got Lois pregnant?
I don't know if it's the proverbial in vitro version of it or if he, hatched it in that
Did it the
pod.
old-fashioned way?
It's for science. Yeah, I don't know, but there is reference of somehow, he basically goes, here's some vials as you needed in order to kind of keep my legacy going.
That's a whole different issue where Superman donated his DNA.
yeah, that was issue 6.5. It was only a very limited release.
White room with some magazines.
Yeah, with Grant Morrison's writing, it probably would have been a good read.
Right.
It would have been an engaging story, very touching. Well, that's probably not the right term, but yeah,
very touching.
Faster than a speeding bullet. It was a lot that was crammed into these 12 issues, which is interesting when you compare, like, this is how Grant Morrison would see the end of Superman. And then you compare that to basically, Alan Moore was given just 2 issues. One was, here's Superman. And then it continued, I think, in Action Comics was the last. It was like Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. And Alan Moore got to write what would happen at the end of Superman. Alan Moore got to do it in continuity, and it was like wrapping up the Superman that existed from the Golden Age all the way up to Crisis on Infinite Earths. And then John Byrne relaunched Superman with his Man of Steel miniseries and kind of redid all of it. Alan Moore got to write the last one, and interesting how 2 master writers approached the same kind of premise. What would you do? What would you do? And what they came up with. And both of them, I think, like you said, if you were to say, what are the top 5 stories for Superman? This story arc and Alan Moore's story arc of how the end of Superman are right up there, because they're both like bringing a lot of relevance to the character, bringing up a lot of intention back to the character, and show that this character is very, very viable, even though they're ending that character. And I felt like it lived up to both the all-star components. It was an all-star Superman. It was an all-star story for Superman. And it was an all-star creative team behind it with a Grant Morrison and Quitely.
I agree. Except Bizarro.
That was just star. It wasn't all-star. It was just star.
It was half a star.
Yeah. And 3 3/4 stars, says Ed McMahon. So overall, good read.
So if you've read All-Star Superman and you have a different opinion, please let us know.
Make every day of your life super.
If you have any comments, questions, concerns, or want to tell us what we should read next, then why don't you Gmail us at and this is why I love comics at gmail.com. Check me out on the Twitter. It's in the show notes. We haven't done anything on our TikTok yet, but that's probably my fault.
Make certain we got it. You mentioned the 16 episodes. So if you liked what you heard here, there's just plenty of others to listen to at this point. We got a built up library to kind of dive back through. So if there's any of these jokes you don't understand, you may not ever understand them, but you might catch a glimpse or a reference here or there in past episodes.
Tell a friend. Tell if they will like what they hear too. Anybody who likes comics, old guys,
cantankerous, highly opinionated.
People who cough a lot.
And microphone problems.
Right. If you like microphone problems, we're the
podcast for you. Yeah.
So and this is why I love comics. Thanks for listening. I'm Andy.
And I'm Mike.
And we'll see you next time. Thunder Chicken, go.
That's 'cause Project ?